The shy waitress softly greeted the billionaire's deaf mother, but just a few hand motions later, the entire dining hall fell silent. "Stay until the end, because this might be our last meeting. Hit follow, comment with the city you're watching from, and share, so this story can keep being told." The crystal chandelier scattered shimmering streaks of light across Lumiere's marble floor. Elena Morales adjusted her black apron for the third time that night, not because she feared serving Manhattan's elite, but because of the familiar weight of hiding her true self. At 24, she had mastered the art of invisibility, gliding like a polite shadow amid the whispers of people who had never worried about rent or hospital bills. "Table 12 needs more wine," said Jade, the head server, without lifting her head from the order pad. "And try not to spill anything on Mr. Damien Caldwell again. He's already complained twice about the room temperature tonight." Elena nodded, carrying a bottle of Chateau Margaux worth more than her monthly wage. Damien Caldwell? The name itself smelled of money old and new. For 3 months she had served his table, and he had never once looked at her as an actual human being. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was low, crisp, tinged with impatience that made Elena's back straighten on its own. Damien stood closer than she'd expected, steel gray eyes locked on her with an intensity that fluttered her stomach. The suit was immaculate, surely Italian, surely expensive. "Your wine, sir," Elena said softly, lifting the bottle slightly. "Not for me." Damien tilted his head toward the elegant woman at the table behind him. "My mother. She's been signaling to you for 10 minutes. Elena looked over, her heart catching. Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell, silver hair, pinned neatly kind eyes that seemed to hide a universe of stories. Her fingers moved subtly, her lips curved in a hopeful smile. Without thinking, Elena set the bottle on the nearest table and stepped over. "Good evening," she signed with measured, practiced movements. "How may I help you?" Mrs. Beatrice's face lit up. "The salmon is wonderful," she replied with her hands. "Tell the cook the flavor takes me back to Paris years ago." Elena smiled the first smile of the night. "I'll pass that on right away. Would you like me to ask about the preparation? I think the kitchen uses a special herb blend." Around them the room's hum dipped slightly, but Elena focused only on Mrs. Beatrice's storytelling hands about travel, about the loneliness of people who merely smile and move on because she cannot hear. "You sign beautifully," the older woman said. "Where did you learn linguistics?" Elena blurted, then froze. A blade-clean interruption. Damien's voice cut in low and sharp. "Which school?" And Elena understood. 1 minute of sincerity was enough to crack the anonymous mask she had painstakingly worn for the past 2 years. The lights inside Lumiere still glittered, reflecting on crystal glasses. The gentle clink of silverware blended with soft classical music. In that opulent frame, Elena felt like a mismatched piece. She was used to shrinking and disappearing among tuxedos and gowns as guests chatted lightly about Riviera vacations or a new Fifth Avenue apartment. Damien Caldwell, the man who made eyes unconsciously lower when he entered. Inherited wealth and self-made influence braided into one aura of power. For 3 months, Elena had been nothing but a moving shadow around his table 12, like an unnamed piece of furniture. Jade, the head server, kept watch. Her gaze a mix of warning and suspicion. She knew a single misstep with a client as powerful as Caldwell could cost the hard-kept job. But tonight was different. From the moment Elena signed to Mrs. Beatrice, the entire dining room seemed to pause. The invisible server was suddenly seen not only by the wealthiest guest in the room, but by the mother he cherished. Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell, past 60, gentle-eyed with a seasoned smile. That smile carried relief at finally finding someone who truly listened, and that very bond formed in the language of silence began to crack Elena's shell. Damien stepped closer, his voice like a command. "Columbia. Isn't it? It." Just 4 words, but Elena's heart sank. It was no longer a polite exchange. It was an interrogation. In that instant, amid music and curious glances, Elena realized she no longer had time to hide. Everything she had buried was being pulled into the light. Elena's hand trembled slightly. She tried to keep her voice even. "Just a few classes, sir. Nothing significant." But Damien didn't let it go. He moved half a step closer, gray eyes probing as if to peel back every mask. "Nothing significant. You sign fluently, you respond smoothly. I'd wager this isn't the skill of someone who stumbled into a few sessions. What else are you hiding?" His tone was low, yet it tautened the space like a drawn string. Nearby diners fell quiet heads, tilting to watch. From the hostess stand, Jade frowned clearly, calculating how to step in to protect her staff. Elena reached for the bottle, ready to retreat. But Damien's hand stopped her, not rough, just firm enough to keep her still. The unexpected touch threw off her heartbeat. In his eyes, the earlier hardness softened into a fleeting, unfamiliar vulnerability. "Sorry," he murmured, as if admitting he'd gone too far. "My mother rarely likes anyone at first. But she likes you." Elena nodded, curbing the tension. "She told me about Paris, about her travels." Mrs. Beatrice's small smile returned. Her fingers traced a playful rhythm in the air. "You two should talk more. Damien works too much and hardly meets interesting people." Elena translated, trimming the mischief. But Damien watched closely, the corner of his mouth lifting. "That's not all. What else did she tease me about?" Elena hesitated, then confessed. "She wants you to eat more vegetables." Laughter burst unexpectedly, rippling across the room. A moment that felt like relief, but Elena knew that from the instant Damien mentioned Columbia, the carefully built mask had started to crack, and for the first time in 2 years of hiding, Elena realized her past was rushing back harder than ever. Elena swallowed, keeping her face neutral. Damien didn't relent. He leaned in slightly, voice so low only she could hear. "Columbia doesn't produce nobodies. If you studied there, there's more. I don't know." "So who are you really?" "Elena Morales." Her full name rang in her chest like an alarm bell. For 3 months, she had been merely the server at table 12, a shadow skimming the floor. Now this powerful man had named the part of her she'd worked hardest to conceal. The dining room air thickened. Elena felt the curious eyes of a few diners. Somewhere a spoon paused midair. From afar, Jade's face tightened. One mistake, and the young woman could lose her job tonight. Elena drew a breath and said softly, "Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan." Damien leaned back, eyes still fixed on her, no longer simple curiosity, but a challenge. "Doesn't go according to plan? Or are you running from something?" Before Elena could answer, Mrs. Beatrice's fingers resumed their cadence. Her eyes twinkled. "My son needs to meet more interesting people." Elena translated, omitting the cheeky undertone. But Damien narrowed his eyes, missing nothing. "That's not all," she said. "Right. I know my mother. Is she trying to play matchmaker?" Soft laughter rippled around the table, but a chill traced Elena's spine. Every word from Mrs. Beatrice. Every question from Damien drew her closer to the cliff's edge of truth. Tonight, the safe shell Elena had clung to for 2 years had officially loosened. and Damien Caldwell's gaze told her he wouldn't stop until he knew the whole person behind the mask. That night, Elena left Lumiere with heavy steps. Manhattan's streetlights blazed. Traffic rushed by, but to her the city was made of threatening shadows. Her small Queens apartment was cramped, and so quiet she could hear her heartbeat. She shut the door, leaned against the wall, and with trembling hands pulled an old metal box from under the bed. Inside were not jewelry or savings, but fragments of a former life. A Columbia MBA, a CPA license, and draft patent smudged by tears. Just looking at them tightened her throat. They had once been her pride until the only person she fully trusted betrayed her, Adrian Chen, the almost husband who turned her future to ash. He hadn't just stolen ideas and filed patents under his name. He'd fabricated accusations, turning Elena from a promising finance professional into a fraud in the eyes of colleagues and clients. Reputation erased, accounts frozen, career wrecked. Only one path remained: disappear. Elena opened her old laptop, fingers flying. For 2 years she had avoided any news about Adrian. But tonight, after hearing Damien say Columbia, she knew the past would not stay buried. The search result froze her blood. Caldwell Industries, Pinnacle Financial merger announcement. 2 names side by side. Damien Caldwell and Adrian Chen, strategic partners. Elena collapsed into the chair, a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. Fate, it seemed, had been patiently waiting for this moment to push her back into the orbit of the man who ruined her life and place her opposite the powerful man who had begun to suspect her. In the dark, her phone buzzed. A message glowed. "This is Damien Caldwell. Thank you for being kind to my mother tonight. She hasn't stopped talking about you. Sleep well." Polite words, but to Elena, they felt like a tightening cord. There was no longer any doubt Damien had begun to investigate. The next morning, autumn chill wrapped around Columbia University's campus. Maple trees had begun to turn red, and orange leaves drifting down the steps of Low Library with each breeze. Elena stood at the foot of the stairs, her heart pounding. Last night's message from Damien still glowed on her phone. "Meet me at Columbia. I want to see where you studied." An invitation, yet also a trap. Running would only raise his suspicion. Facing him meant stepping out of the shadows. She chose a simple black dress, the only relic from her old life once worn at conferences. Putting it on now felt like reenacting a role she had long lost. On the steps, Damien was already waiting, 2 steaming coffee cups at his side. Different from the cold businessman in an Italian suit the night before this morning, he wore a cashmere sweater and dark jeans. Still expensive, but oddly approachable. "You came," he said, rising to hand her a cup. "I wasn't sure you would." Elena took it, her hand shaking more from his words than the heat. "I wasn't sure until the last minute." They sat on the stone steps. Students bustled past, lively and loud, yet between them stretched a pocket of stillness. Damien studied her closely, no longer with mere curiosity, but with patient demand for truth. 24. Columbia education. Speaks multiple languages. Knows fine wine. And yet, waiting tables in Manhattan. He tilted his head. "Elena, that isn't coincidence. That's running." The words pierced. Elena gripped the cup, lips trembling. After 2 years of silence, she finally admitted, "Yes, I'm running. Not from debts or failure, but from the man who destroyed me." Damien stiffened, his expression sharpening. "Who?" Elena met his gaze, peeling away the last disguise. "Adrian Chen." The name hit the stone steps like a thunderclap. Damien froze, his hand tightening around the cup. He muttered under his breath, "Chen, is my partner." In that instant, Elena's world spun again. The man she had just begun to trust stood on the same side as the one who had wrecked her life. On the 32nd floor of Pinnacle Financial's glass tower, the conference room blazed with light. A long wooden table was covered in documents charts glowing on the big screen. The air was heavy enough to hear the clock tick. Adrian Chen entered with his usual confident smile. Tailored suit polished gestures, eyes gleaming as if he already owned the world. "Damien, glad you agreed to move the meeting. We'll shave 6 weeks off the merger." Damien sat at the head of the table, calm-faced, though his fists clenched beneath. Beside him, Elena wore the guise of Dr. Morales, independent consultant. Hair-pinned simple black dress, firm and steady. Her heart thudded, but her eyes no longer ran. "This is Dr. Morales," Damien introduced. "She's here to verify intellectual property. I want to ensure every asset is clean before we finalize." Adrian faltered for a split second. Elena caught the flicker of panic in the eyes she once loved. But his mask snapped back into place and he extended a hand warmly. "Pleasure, Doctor." "Haven't we met before?" Elena stood tall, her hand unmoving. Her voice was calm, sharp as a blade. "Not just met Adrian. I co-founded Pinnacle with you. I wrote the first lines of code, signed the original patent drafts. But in your memory, perhaps I never existed." A ripple of whispers circled the table. Staff from both Pinnacle and Caldwell Industries exchanged stunned looks. Damien leaned forward, his gaze ice cold. How do you explain Elena's name being erased from every patent, or why metadata shows the originals came from her personal computer? Adrian scoffed, clinging to composure. "Ridiculous. Any file can be forged." Elena unlocked her tablet, flipping through photos she and Adrian at the launch party, handwritten notes dated months before, Patton's emails where he begged her to explain algorithms he didn't understand. Each image punctured his facade. "Can you forge an engagement ring too?" Elena asked, voice like frost. A photo appeared, Adrian kissing her cheek, diamond glinting on her hand. The smile drained from Adrian's face. The room fell silent. Damien rose, towering authority radiating. "Adrian, this deal is over. Effective immediately. And I will personally make sure every partner in the industry knows the truth about you." Adrian slammed the table, snarling. "You'll regret this. I'll ruin you both." Elena cut in, her voice ringing steady. "You already did, Adrian. You stole my career. My name turned me into a ghost for 2 years. But this time is different. This time, I am not alone." Her eyes met Damien's. In that moment, Elena knew the cycle of fear had ended. She was no longer a victim. The conference room door shut behind Adrian, leaving a heavy silence. Shocked faces slowly shifted into nods of agreement, turning toward Damien and Elena. A $1 billion deal had just collapsed, but in Elena's chest, a far heavier burden had lifted. The next morning, headlines exploded: Pinnacle Financial accused of IP fraud, Caldwell merger collapses. Morning broadcasts showed Adrian leaving headquarters pale and shaken. Elena sat by the window of her small apartment, tea cooling in her hand. For the first time in 2 years, she was not running. Calls poured in, reporters, lawyers, even former colleagues seeking forgiveness. But she simply smiled and shut the phone. She didn't need public validation, only truth. 6 months later, a golden morning in Manhattan, a leading newspaper blared Adrian Chen sentenced to 5 years for fraud and document forgery. Just beneath, another headline made Elena chuckle softly. Morales Technologies signs record deal, first quarter revenue surpasses forecasts. In a Tribeca penthouse kitchen, sunlight streamed across glass walls. Damien wrapped his arms around Elena from behind, pressing a gentle kiss to her shoulder. His voice warm, steady. "See, justice may come late, but it does come." Elena leaned back against him, eyes tracing the vibrant city. Amid car horns and restless life, she found rare peace-trust love and a new beginning. She was no longer the waitress hiding behind a wine bottle. She had reclaimed her name, her intellect, her strength, things no one could erase. And above all, Elena Morales had learned sometimes losing everything is the chance to discover what matters most. If you're still here after this story, remember, truth can be hidden, but never erased. Elena Morales was erased from the very company she co-founded, living in fear and silence. But by standing up, and by finding someone who believed, she reclaimed both her dignity and her future. In a world where wealth and power often drown out justice, the only anchor left is faith in your own worth. Genuine kindness, like Elena's conversation with Damien's mother, can sometimes be the turning point that changes everything. The message for us all: do not underestimate yourself just because others deny you. Do not mistake long darkness for absence of light. Justice may be slow, but it will find you if you persist with courage. If you believe this comment, justice finds its voice, let's remind each other that justice is never truly silent. Hit follow, share this video, and tell me where you're watching from, because the next story might just be yours.